Hello, everyone. I wanted to take time today and talk about habit building. Habits, in one form or another, dictate nearly everything in our lives. Our brains love habits. Just think about your day for a minute. When you get up in the morning for work, what do? When you shower, what order do you do things in? What are the steps that you take to get ready all the way up to when you get in your car, or if you work at home, when you start work? If you're like most people, those steps are nearly identical every single day. That is, at least assuming you don't take a break from them by taking a day off or a vacation. Using my own experience to illustrate, when I leave for work, I exit our house into the garage, and we have stairs that go up to our house in the garage. As I step out the door, I always step out and I turn around and I pull the door shut with my right hand while I'm reaching up to push the garage door opener button with my left hand on the wall. It's actually on the left side. So once I get in my vehicle, I put my foot on the brake, I push the start button. At this point, my habit sometimes gets interrupted by music, which is a clear sign that my wife drove the car the night before. So usually I grumble to myself a little bit and I shut it off. Then I put the car in drive, I check my mirrors and backup camera, and I begin backing out of the garage. While I'm backing out, I reach up with my right hand to the visor and I clamp my hand around the visor with my thumb placed on the garage door opener. And as soon as I clear the garage, I push the garage door button. I continue backing out of the driveway while checking my mirrors and my backup camera. I take one last look at the garage door to ensure that it closed, and I drive away. You know, it's amazing how automated this habit is. In fact, your brain even references it at different times. For example, when my wife is driving, when she backs out of the garage, her habit isn't to close the garage door until she's all the way backed out into the street. So when I'm riding with her, this typically causes me to say, are you going to close the garage door? While we're backing out down the driveway, because my habit is to close it as soon as I get out of the garage. Hers is to wait until she gets into the street. Now, that's obviously a detailed description that seems probably a little bit absurd to walk through in that manner, because most days I don't even know that I'm doing it. If you think of your habits, I'm sure, and your daily activities, if you truly think about them, I'm sure you have the same thing. So the reason that I don't know that I'm doing this is that our brains create something called a habit loop. Think of it like a program that your brain accesses when you begin an activity that runs the very same every single time, or at least until something is out of the ordinary. Then the loop is broken. So if you have ever changed jobs and suddenly have to drive to a new work location, you know what I'm talking about. That change requires you to break your brain's habit loop and essentially write a new program for traveling to work. Now, I say a new program because it doesn't overwrite the old one. Your brain archives that old habit loop, and sometimes it will try to access that loop instead of the new one. It's happened to me more than once in my career when I started a new position or my office relocated that I accidentally started driving to an old office location before realizing it and having to correct the situation. If you think about your life, I'm sure similar things have happened when you're used to a particular route, and then for some reason you need to change that route, but you end up on the same route and then you realize, where the heck am I? That's exactly what happens. Basically, your brain is referencing back to that original habit loop. Our brains create these habit loops in order to basically simplify things to ensure that they don't get overloaded. So rather than trying to essentially create or learn each situation as it occurs every single time, once a habit loop is created, your brain can just execute that program, as it were. This process, it's described in detail in a book by Charles Duhigg in his book, The Power of Habit. It actually is this book. I highly recommend it. It's an amazing book. And if you're interested in some of the science behind habits and habit loops, he He has some amazing stories and references, interesting research that explains the power of habits and a lot of the stuff that goes into how those things happen in a lot of various scenarios. In one part of the book, Duhigg references the huge focus that marketers have put on science, on the science of habits, and how it helps sell products. This is something I'm sure you've heard about, especially in years past, especially with social media. This has been going on in advertising for a long time, but social media companies have been criticized recently for doing similar things and taking advantage of this sort of science to basically keep you engaged and keep you in their apps. So basically, they've used the science, marketers have used this science to become experts almost at manipulating us into buying their products. So one of the examples that Duhigg offers is the development of the product Febreze, the air freshener Febreze. So, and not the air freshener itself, but they have the air freshener version, then they have the version for eliminating odors that you spray as well. When they came out with the product to eliminate odors, when it was first developed, Procter & Gamble actually tested it with customers, and they found that the product was amazing at removing odors. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. It was off the charts. And their marketing team came up with creative advertising that talked about how effective it was at removing pet odors and smoke smells and general household odors. But later, when they ran the ads, they were a total flop. Sales were terrible, and the marketing team was actually in hot water over it. They ran some more tests, and they could not figure out what the issue was. Like, the product is amazing. Why is it not selling? Ultimately, what they discovered was that they had two problems. The first one, which probably won't come as a surprise, was the fact that people generally didn't believe that their house had any odor because they were used to it. They become nose blind to the smells of their own houses. That's why when you're in your house, you don't notice your own house has a smell, but when you go to visit someone else's house, you do notice that their house has a different smell. People found the concept of Febreze amazing, which is why it tested well up front, but because they didn't think their own house smelled, they saw no reason to buy it. They saw it as something that is a good product for somebody else. So that was their first problem. The second problem, or the second reason that P&G marketers found, was that when people did buy it, they didn't believe it worked. And that was because the original product, when it was first developed, actually had no scent. So when you sprayed it, you didn't smell anything. When they used it, their perception was that it must not be working because they couldn't smell anything. So the first issue is they don't think they have a problem in their house anyway, but if they did buy it and then they sprayed it, they couldn't smell anything, so it must not be working. So how did P&G marketers overcome that? Well, first, they added scent to the product, which is why the product that you have today, unless you specifically look for, and it's hard to find, the unscented version, it has a scent to it. So people can smell it when they spray it. Second, the second thing that they did was surrounding habit. And the idea that people are in a routine, and they used people's habit loops to help sell the product. So the marketing team switched up their messaging. They removed most of the language about odor elimination, and they focused more on talking points and imagery that actually showed people finishing up cleaning their house, spraying Febreze, and then admiring their freshly cleaned room. So their imagery showed, and if you think about it, some Febreze ads, especially from early on, I'm sure if you remember them, this is what it looked like. It showed somebody finished cleaning their room, their living room, and they look at it and they admire it, and they spray Febreze everywhere, and they sit there and they admire it. So basically, they built up spraying Febreze into the habit of cleaning. So they added it into your habit loop for when you clean. And they ran these ads and sales skyrocketed. They just totally took off. And that's pretty much the history as it goes. And now you see the Febreze odor eliminator, you see Febreze air fresheners and everything. But that's really how it started. And it was all because these marketers figured out that they needed to insert Febreze into people's habit of cleaning. In order to do that, they reinforced this message that you finish cleaning and you immediately spray Febreze, whether you need to or not. And that's how they increased their sales. So that's just one of many stories that Duhigg shares, in addition to discussing the science of habits and the brain. I encourage you, like I said, to read the book. It's a great book and has lots of other stories, some of them in marketing, some of them outside of that as well, that deal directly with people and how they build habits and that sort of thing as well. So this habit building process, it's both a positive and a negative in our lives, and indeed in our professional lives. It can be a negative if we're in a habit loop that works against us. It can be a positive if we're in a habit loop that works or that benefits us. The good news is that we can use these habits to our advantage. It just takes a little bit of work and enough time for your brain to write that program so that it can be easily executed, or to archive one and start a new one. This process it's especially helpful in the context of completing goals. So when we set goals, there are certain activities or steps that we need to complete on a regular basis to ensure that that goal as a whole is completed. We need to build habits around those activities and steps to ensure that we complete them on a regular basis and complete them effortlessly. So creating that habit loop is going to be important. What this means is that when you set a goal, you should also be identifying those activities and establish a plan for locking them in as habits. Help yourself create that habit loop so that you do those activities automatically. Because if you do that, then you're going to have a much better chance of completing your overarching goal. So for example, when I decided to write my book, I set a goal of writing a book, but that's pretty vague. And it's not really helpful at telling me how I'm going to get the first word on the page to the arrival of the first printed copy. How do I get from that point, from A to Z? So I had to set some behaviors and get in the habit of completing those behaviors on a regular basis. I had to commit to writing for at least a few hours every week. Then later, once my book started taking shape, I committed to finishing a couple of chapters every couple of weeks. And then still later, my behaviors were set on that, and I needed to begin working on editing a few hours each week. Without having created a habit of completing those particular actions and behaviors every single week, I wouldn't have made progress on the completion of the book. This concept applies really to all goals, whether they're personal or professional. So they can apply to professional goals, as I just illustrated. They can apply to personal goals like exercising more, or weight loss, or wanting to read more books, or anything that you have on a personal side as well. Basically, your overarching goal statement should be what success looks like. So in my case, my goal statement was, I've published a book on leadership. Then the actions that you take and the behaviors you implement to create the habits that provide the detailed roadmap, they provide the detailed roadmap for how you get there to that completion. So I have a published book on leadership, and then my actions and behaviors, all those things that I said with committing to writing so much per week or editing so much per week, they are the actions and behaviors that I needed to do to get to that particular goal statement. So I hope you found this valuable. I hope you made some notes and that will help you in your personal and professional life both. Now go write some goals and start building your habit loops. Have an amazing day. Remember, my book, The Indispensable Leader, was released today and can be ordered online at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, as well as other book retailers. Check it out on those sites, or you can visit my website at beindispensable.com to find all of the links for purchase. Once again, that's beindispensable.com. The book is The Indispensable Leader. And always remember, don't forget to be indispensable.